All right. Welcome to Path of Purpose. Gary, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I guess like my first question would be, what would your advice be to your 18-year-old self?
I think when I think about that question, the reality is that I probably, if are you saying if I'm talking to that person right this second,
Yeah.
I would say that the plan is right. Like you're going to enjoy these next 4 years at college and take a vacation and not take it serious because you know that as soon as you're done, you're going to work your face off for 15 years trying to help your father and your family business because you're an immigrant and this is how you've been brought up.
Mm,
And then good news, you don't know this yet, but at some point you're going to realize, wait a minute, I need to build something for myself. And you'll have that opportunity and you'll still be more than young enough to build something meaningful. And so I would say that I'd probably also say that, hey, by the way, your one kryptonite is that if you love people, you struggle to be candorous to them.
mm,
And you should work on that because it leads to resentment. And that is a vulnerability.
mm,
Um, and that's probably the framework of the combo.
mm. What do you? I don't know what candorous means. What does that mean?
It means being able to tell the truth to people, what you're actually thinking. It's
Mm,
funny. As you know, you were intern at at my company, and you know the public persona. I'm very candorous and transparent and very authentic and very real and straight shooter when I'm publicly doing things or when it's a big company, but on a one-on-one basis with a
yeah.
human, if I love them, if I care about them, if I'm upset with them or I'm struggling with something with them, I've struggled most of my life in telling them that.
Mm,
And that became a huge vulnerability for me, both professionally and personally. And so that's something that I'm looking to do. By the way, the definition is the quality of being open and honest in expression and frankness.
mm, yeah. I've found also that that can be very challenging, and for me it feels like I feel like that's challenging because I have a tendency to like worry about what people think, and I don't want to upset them sometimes. So I'm curious what.
I'm not
Yeah.
worried about what they think of me. I'm worried that they're going to be upset. I don't want to hurt feelings.
Mm,
And the issue with that is you end up hurting the feelings even more the longer you hang on to it. Um, and so yeah, it's been a very ironically big challenge because again, the the less I'm talking to one person and the less I know you, actually candor is my strength.
yeah.
When I do an interview like this, when I'm on stage, when I'm talking to 20 people or even 10 executives at once instead of one executive that works for me, it's easier for me to be candorous.
Yeah. So what are ways in which you can practice doing that and be able to do that also in a way where um yeah, in a way where you're also like respectful to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I call it kind candor. I wrote about it in one of my last books, 12 and a half, and it comes very natural to me now to go there on the kind part. The candor
Yeah.
part is the kind part was always easy.
Yeah.
The candor part I've taken from a 2 to a 5.5, 6. So I've still got a long way to go to be a 10 out of 10. But the kind part is just intent. Do you
Mm,
actually intend on being kind? So that part is there. And, you know, how do you practice it? It's kind of like, how do you practice swimming if you can't swim? How do you practice riding a bike if you can't ride a bike? You actually have to do it. And at first it's sloppy and not as good. And then you
mhm.
just get better at it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like having the intention of doing that and then being able to look back and say like, hey, this is how I did and this is how I could improve moving forward.
100%.
So
Yep.
it sounds like also you said like from a 2 to a 5. It sounds like there's also a lot of humility in that as well, like by recognizing where the work is still to be done.
Yeah. I think, it's funny. Again, maybe you got a sense of this when you interned at the company. it's not as obvious in my public persona, meaning like how I show up in those settings, but I think humility's been foundational for my success.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to say out loud on a podcast that will forever be seen that I'm at a 2 to 5,
Yeah.
but I continue to challenge myself on being a little more vulnerable, which is not a strength, but humility is a strength. Like
Mm.
I can, I don't, I may not be outwardly telling people all my worries and concerns. And that, I think there's some strength in being better at vulnerability, but humility, like I'm never lying to myself. I
Yeah.
know who I am. And I know, like every other human on earth, there's things that I'm good at, there's things
Mhm.
that I'm bad at. I think, I do think that I sit in a very luxurious place that I think millions sit with, but I don't know if billions sit with, which is there's certain things that I'm really great at,
Yeah.
exceptional at, and entrepreneurship and business and brand building and selling and being a leader and caring about people. Those things I feel like I'm in the upper echelon on, and so I'm grateful for that natural
Mm.
gift, the circumstances that led to me being good at that.
Wow. What advice would you have for somebody who is gaining a lot of traction and success, someone who's young? What advice would you give them to practice staying humble and not letting pride get in the way of their character?
Yeah, I don't think it's I think pride and ego are disguises for insecurity.
Mm.
It's say somebody who's winning a lot early, and I that happened to me professionally. Like, I try to remind them that like iconic people, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Prince, you know, like incredible people have come and done incredible things in the world, and then they die, and then we honor them for a day or two,
Mhm.
and then they're, in history, but it's kind of like it's over. We forget more and more and more. Like
Yeah.
I can't notice the people I reference. There are people that have been born in the 19th century, 1900s. Like there's people that did. I didn't say Abraham Lincoln. We all know who that is. There's a legacy there, but I think humility is imperative. And so, no matter what you succeed in, like are you really that important if you made $5 million? Like,
Yeah.
like what does that really mean? And so, I think most people are leaning on bravado and ego and showmanship and peacocking from a
Yeah.
place of insecurity.
Mm.
And listen, in doses, it's wonderful. I mean, I do it in doses. It's there's a level of charisma, showmanship in a good way, but when it's your entire framework and when you don't balance it with
Mm.
humility and empathy and compassion and sympathy, when you don't have it figured out, meaning you think you're bigger than you are, you come across audacious, and you become incredibly not interesting for people, um, because any level of glitz and glamour and fame wears off pretty quickly once you get to know
Mm.
someone.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think I would just recommend to all the kids that are listening that have had some success of like nobody gives a shit, calm the fuck down, like be nice.
Yeah.
On the way up, the more positive impact you create, the more likely that there'll be people there to support you on your way down. Everybody has ups and downs,
Yeah.
and and you're never more important than anybody else. You may have more leverage, you may have more relationships, you may have more resources, you may have more clout, um, but it doesn't make you better than per se in the overall game of life. And you need to
Mhm.
keep your professional success very calibrated. I can tell you unequivocally that I know that my identity is not wrapped up in my professional success. My identity is wrapped up in how people talk about me.
Mm.
One of the reasons before we started this podcast, or you were able to say kind words about your internship here, is because of the kindness that I am a dictator of, and it all trickles down, which is why you
Mhm.
felt it. And
Mm.
I'm more you saying to me before we went on air that internship was the best experience and it's how you've judged everything going forward. that meant more to me than you saying you're impressed that I invested in Facebook and Twitter early, or that I built VFriends, or
Yeah.
that I'm a 6-time New York Times bestselling author. Like, they're not even close, actually.
Hmm. Yeah. So how do you mentioned also a balance between like that bravado and showmanship, and that balance of like humility, and also, yeah, balancing that with humility. So how do you balance that?
By being conscious about it, by being able to articulate it on a podcast in real time right now. It's on my mind.
Hmm.
It's important to me. It's kind of like, how do you stay healthy? You know, once you decide you want to be healthy, it doesn't take long for you to realize that working out and eating well, along with rest and other things, are really important.
Yeah.
And so, I want to be as good of a person as I'm capable of, notwithstanding many shortcomings like candor and other things I've talked about. Um, and so, thus, those things
Hmm.
became obvious to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't articulate it in my 20s. I wasn't thinking about humility that way, but
Hmm.
um, I do now, and I've recognized how much of a superpower that's been. And it's prioritizing that behavior in
Hmm.
my day to day, and that's that.
Mm. Yeah. It sounds like too, it seems like with humility too, it's something that it seems like in your case it was you recognized how it could be more helpful or more beneficial for you to 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 have humility. Was there
Yeah,
like
but I would say in my soul and who I wanted to be as a human, not like as a business strategy,
yeah.
though I do believe likability and relationships and reputation, like, clearly is a good thing, like,
Yeah.
for business. But I did it. I mean, look, taking a step back, I did it because it's my natural DNA that I got from my mother, and it's the way my mother parented me.
Yeah.
I believe whether you have a stay at home mom or dad, if you have a parent that's really on you as a parent, and you share their DNA, and whatever that is, it's a good trait. In this scenario, in my story,
Hmm.
and Tamara Vaynerchuk, my mom's story, it was kindness.
Mm,
Well, it
yeah.
becomes like second nature. Like, there was no way I was going to be able to be an asshole. I
Yeah.
just didn't grow up with a mother that even could have created that scenario.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
And so
Do you feel?
when I talk about my personality or me in this setting, I don't view like I'm giving myself flowers. I feel like I'm giving my parents flowers because I'm the byproduct of their work.
Mm, yeah. So like honoring your parents in a way.
Yeah, and then just, yes, in this scenario, a lot of people aren't as fortunate as I am. They actually are trying to be the opposite of their parents because
Mm,
of the way they were parented. And so, to me, in this scenario, yes, it is honoring my parents. It's what drove me to want to go into the business, even though it wasn't financially fruitful for me to be in my dad's business
mm,
all those years. It was spiritually, emotionally, the most fruitful thing I could have done.
wow. Wow. So yeah, that's really fascinating. And so it seems like by going into the wine business, you felt like there were other things that you could have been doing that might have been sexier, but this was what felt right in your heart.
Yeah, not only sex. I don't whether it was sexy or sure. I guess ultimately yes. I don't know if running a retail wine store was sexy, but I made it sexy quick by going into e-com.
Yeah.
It would have been more lucrative for me. I was
Yeah.
working 100 hours a week throughout my 20s, making between 50 and $80,000 a year. It was, and I built a huge business, and I owned none of it. And so yeah, it was incredibly non-lucrative financially, but as I get older, it's the single best business decision I ever made
Yeah.
because, I watched a movie last night where the dad dies. And of course, I'm very like emotionally charged. So I'm always,
Hmm.
I'm very capable of crying during a movie.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it invokes feelings, and I'm just incredibly grateful that I have those memories with my father. That when I'm 90
Yeah.
is what I'm going to value more than the money.
Yeah. And it also seems by going and doing that thing that was honoring your parents, it also became this thing that was like far greater than you could have even imagined in that time.
From a stories, from a I brought my best friend in, from a yeah, I just feel at peace is what I would say, Jace.
Yeah.
Like I brought the learnings. By the time I was 22, I'd already been doing business my entire life.
Hmm.
Like I'm truly out of central casting,
Hmm.
lemonade stands, shoveling snow, washing cars, baseball card shows. By the time I got into my dad's business at 14 to go bag ice and stock shelves, I was already a businessman.
Yeah.
I was already a contributor to my dad's business by the time I was 16, thinking about what to buy, how to merchandise, what to sell. By the time I was 22, I ran the business
Yeah.
fully, fully. And so, that was my natural talent, but I'd also put in a lot of work. I was a terrible student because my hours back then were allocated to business. It is a great for my mom, who's happy that I went to college. We always joke that I might have not even graduated middle school if the internet was around when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was doing this pre-internet, and I mean, it was analog. I would go buy things at the mall and sell them at a flea market two
Hmm.
weeks later on a Saturday. If I had the speed and infrastructure of social and the internet, I would have been. Phew.
What are ways in which you feel that you're still honoring your parents in the work that you're doing now?
Hmm. A really good question. I continue to honor my parents, how I show up as a human being. I would say I, if I split up my parents, I continue to show my humanity um, in every turn, which is what my mom taught me and nurtured. And I continue to not complain and put my head down and work towards solutions um, through sheer will and effort and time, like my father.
Mm, yeah. It sounds like you've also like kind of married the two into the work that you're doing now as well.
100%. Gary V is an incredible indication of being the byproduct of Tamara and Sasha Vaynerchuk. And
Yeah.
honestly, I want to give a hat tip to America. Not only my parents, but my circumstance. I came to America in 78, and the American dream and capitalism and entrepreneurship and freedom um, was essential in
Mm,
forming me. I
yeah.
came from a place where there was fear and bureaucracy and communism and just muckery, anti America, literally, actually, the Soviet
Hmm.
Union, like literally the other side of America. Um, and I would have struggled growing up there if we didn't get the lucky chance of leaving there. And so, I'm the byproduct of my parents and the American dream.
Yeah. And also, it seems like the other part of what you just said too is being grateful for your circumstance and the hand that you're dealt.
I think growing up in an Eastern European um, immigrant family, you talk a lot more about family and health and
Yeah.
being grateful. Like, you know, we were yeah, it's not lost on me all where I come from. And I would say gratitude has been the medicine of choice for me to keep me away from any real levels of anxiety.
Yeah.
I
What
would
is that?
argue I would argue that the perspective of gratitude is disproportionately the antidote to anxiety.
I agree. What does that look like for you in your day to day?
That when inevitably multiple times a day I am hit with adversity to substantial issues, the kind of things that really rock people,
Yeah.
um, whether it's based on a nasty interaction or judgment or financial loss, I'm unable to sustain in the cocoon of negativity and darkness. Very quickly, I'm getting in there and reminding myself that everybody I love is healthy, and
Mm,
I'm incredibly blessed that I have the capacity and capability and tenacity and interest to dig myself out of this micro hole.
So it's like being in the hole is a like a trigger for reminding yourself to be grateful.
100%. It's almost like the second I start going down the rabbit hole, that inevitably leads to anxiousness or unhappiness or depression or all the
Yeah.
things that humans deal with. There's there's a counter energy that naturally kicks in through a lot of practice and perspective in my life that gets me whole real fast.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. What is the
On that note, because I know
Yeah,
we're
go.
running, I'm going to double down on that one. I
Yeah. Double
little
down.
last 2 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Please, everybody, rewind the last 3 minutes and listen to it again. It's the secret.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And then I guess just the last point to
Please.
finish on, what would you say is the role of community in keeping that practice of gratitude and yeah,
I
and in honoring your family as well?
Yeah, I love that question, brother. I would say that that is grounded in cutting out negativity and double downing on positivity. You can't choose who you're born into,
Yeah.
but boy, oh boy, as there's something that happens where a big pandemic, a big issue in society right now is there's a time where a 20-year-old, call it between 20 and 29, you're going to have to decide at some point in that window to become an adult.
Hmm.
And what I say by adult, I mean it's now time to recognize no matter what your parents did, you have the ability to start putting in the work, whether it's mentally, meditation, working out, reading different things, surrounding yourself with different people, cutting out your toxic family and friends. You are now at the helm of your life, and you have to be responsible to be happy. And community is a huge part of that. If you hang out with your toxic mom and your loser buddy as your best friend and two other complainers that are your acquaintances, your life's going to blow. It's going to
Yeah.
suck. If you've got a toxic dad and an okay mom, and now you're 23 and you start surrounding yourself with a positive boyfriend or girlfriend,
Hmm.
a job environment that's positive, a a you've got three buddies from college, two of them are negative, you start limiting your time with them, but you quadruple down on the positive buddy, your life becomes good.
Yeah. All right. Well,
All
thank
right.
you for coming on. I really
I'm proud of you,
appreciate you
buddy.
being
Keep
here.
building.
Thank you. All right.